some of my dad's last words. I said, "What are we going to do?" We were sitting on the front porch of his bunkhouse, and he was dying, and I mean, it was bad and ugly. It was cancer, and I said, "Dad, what are we going to do?" And he said, "Shad, will never change this country until everybody sits in the dark, cold, and hungry."
I'm Carson Jorgensen. And this is the Carson Jorgensen Podcast. Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you in part by Crofter Market. Visit crofter.com for more information on how you can buy local food, support independent producers, and help push back against the fight on globalization of agriculture. Again, that's crofter.com for more information. Thanks for joining us today. Today I have a dear friend of mine, American cattle rancher Shad Sullivan. I mean, you've probably seen Shad on Fox or on Glenn Beck. He's been all over the place talking about the very thing that we want to visit about today, and that is the beef industry in the United States, where it's been, where it's headed, what we're going to do about it. Shad, thanks for coming on today, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks, Carson. I appreciate you asking me on.
Yeah, no, we're glad to have you. And Shad and I have these conversations all the time, and that's the funny part of all this. We have conversations all the time, and I'm like, God, one of these days we've got to get these on the internet. Some of it we can repeat, some of it we can't, but they throw us off the internet. But the big one that Shad travels around the country talking about is what's going on in the beef industry and really what's happening. He did a segment on Glenn Beck a while back talking about this very thing because it is important and we talk about it frequently, but the general public seems to not grasp what's actually happening and what is going on behind the scenes. And so it's time to spread the word, and that's why I'm here. That's why Shad's here. Shad, you travel around the country giving your presentation called The War on Beef. Where did that come from? How did you get started?
Ooh, that's a long story. My story is that in 1999, in the first of what they now call a public-private partnership, took place in Colorado between the State Land Board and the Nature Conservancy, and my family ended up losing 80% of our operation through a land grab on that deal. And so that kind of inspired me to look more into what's going on politically in land rights, private property rights. And so I got interested and it became a passion. And of course, when you lose a large portion of your operation to a corrupt deal, it builds a fire in you, and it builds bitterness and anger and all of these crazy things. And so I roll along, and I'm pretty young by then. I graduated college in 1996, and we're rolling along. And then, you meet people that have gone through something similar. And then all of a sudden you start hearing about initiatives like the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and Sustainable Development and all of this stuff that raises your eyebrow, and you're like, what is going on here? And that's really how I came to activism for private property rights. And so that's how I got here. I mean, and then, you're heavily involved. I mean, my family are cattle ranchers. We've been in the beef business in Southeast Colorado for, almost 130 years now. And so I come from that lineage of production agriculture, and we've kind of been in the same area, in the same place for all those years. And so it became a passion. And, I think that those roots are so deeply buried into the ground that I truly identify. My identity is in the land, right? And so anything that affects our American values, which one of those greatest values is the ability to own private property, it affects me and my family and our future and our past and everything. And so that's how I got here. That's why I'm here. And then, of course, you have market swings as we move towards sustainable development in all of these industries and vertical integration. You have these market swings that touch your life dramatically. You know, in 2015, we'd seen the greatest climb in the beef business, the fastest highs in the beef business in history. And then boom, they pulled the rug out from underneath us. Thousands and thousands of people go out of business. I lose a fortune of money. We get back on track. 2019, one fire on August 9th, 2019, decimates our equity by 40%, up to 40% in 2 days. And so we lose money again. And I'm going, something's not right here. Something's not right here. And then I start meeting people that have kind of the same experiences I do, and the same passions and the same belief system, because they can see what's happening. And that's really where it comes from. That's how I got to where I am.
Right. And there's a shortage of voices. And here's where I'm at with agriculture. Everybody knows my background in the sheep industry. What you deal with sounds exactly like we deal with. It's up and it's down. It's nature. It's everything else, environmental factors that are playing into this. But at the end of the day, people still have to eat. And people are becoming more and more dependent on a smaller portion of the population. I think they said 0.7% of the world produces the food for the rest of the world right now. And what's happening in the United States, and I've been fighting this in the sheep industry for the past 4 or 5 years, but really heavily in the last 2, is what's happening to the markets because of external forces. The geopolitical ramifications of what's happening is what's affecting us right now. And to me, that's a big part of it. It's what's happening outside. Why are we not taking care of American agriculture? Why are we not putting American agriculture first? Because for me, that's huge. I mean, food security is national security. You and I have had that conversation a million times, that food security is national security. We have these farmers and ranchers, this agrarian society that is really the basis of what the United States was founded on. And you touched on it just a little bit. You're a part of the land. There's kind of a famous scene in Yellowstone, and John Dutton kind of kicks back and he says, "Hey, I wish we could bottle it and sell it." And his kid says, "Everybody who knows what it's worth is already doing it." And I think that that's how agriculture is right now. That people, it's just part of you, part of who you are. It's part of everything you become, and it just is who you are. But yet it's under attack. And I did a video years ago that went viral, and that was really my introduction to social media. And it had like 6 or 7 million views on it in the beginning. And it was just like, it was something to the effect of, you don't understand. You guys are judging us from the outside, and you think we're after the environment, and you think we're out to ruin the environment and poison the people. No, we're just trying to feed people. That's really all we're doing. And yet the people whom we're trying to help the most are the ones that think that we're trying to kill them. And that is becoming more and more prevalent. But I think there's a moment of awakening here where people are waking up to it and seeing that this is a problem. And I mean, where do we start? Like American agriculture, the war on beef. How have we gotten to the point where we're at, where 80% of the production or processing in the United States is owned by 4 companies?
Well, I'll tell you how we got to where we are now is apathy. And the American consumer has come to depend on corporate agriculture for cheap food, the cheap food policy, right? And America was created and founded on capitalism, a supply and demand driven market. So what has happened through the years is Congress and other forces have allowed the acquisitions and mergers of these mega corporations, because we know that America has been so blessed production wise that we have been able to not only feed America, but feed the world, right? We have this abundance. We have such an abundance of food, and that along with Congress allowing all of these acquisitions and mergers has enabled the corporate production to grow. And it's grown so substantially and uncontrolled that there's no oversight. There's no checks and balances. And whether that's because there is any or not, because there is, it's apathy that we've just let them We've just let them go. And so we get to this point where they have made so much money. If you take a small producer like me, for example, and he makes, let's say on a given year, he makes $10 a head profit on his cattle. Well, if he only has 500 head, that's not very much money, right?
Right.
Because we know it live. But if you have a corporate company, a global corporation that says, let's say they're competing against me in my business, the cattle business, and they make $1 a head, but they can run 20 million head through in 1 year. See the difference? And what happens is they gain power and control. Money gives them, it corrupts them. And they get power and control, then they go to the lobby. The lobby is influenced by nefarious individuals, including the global cabal, or what I call the global elites. The global elites want control of every facet of production and consumption on earth. And so that money starts filtering down. And we know in America that we're to be governed from the bottom up. But once you get that power over the people, then all of those rule makings start to filter down. And so we've moved into a place where supply and demand really isn't an issue. You talk about geopolitical, and I'm not sure I totally understand what geopolitical means, but I do know it means that outside forces totally control what's happening. It's all pay to play. It's all lobbying. It's all emotion. It's all scare tactics. It's all propaganda. It's everything except supply and demand. And that's really what we're supposed to be working on here is supply and demand.
Yeah, and that's where I get in the argument with the free traders about it, because the biggest thing that's impacting the sheep industry is imports. I mean, that is really what is throttling the American sheep industry. Early
Yes.
40s, 50s, the United States sheep industry had 56 million sheep. Right now, we have about 5 million sheep left in the United States. Consumption's not going down, contrary to popular belief. Consumption has actually increases year over year, but 76% of what is consumed in the United States comes from a different country. And people say, oh, it's just free trade, it's fair trade, whatever. There's no such thing as fair trade. There is no such thing as free trade. Because when you talk to these free traders, and that's where I get in the big argument with Congress and some people that I really admire in Congress, we have these fights about what's actually happening with free trade and why this needs to be a deal, because these guys are not meeting the standards that they are forcing. If we had no regulation in the United States, zero, and there were nothing else coming from the government down that forced us to do things in a certain way, and the exchange rate and the money was exactly the same across the board, absolutely welcome to free trade. But that don't happen. We have regulations that we're meeting. We have standards that we're meeting here in the United States. We have minimum wage. We have taxes that we're paying here in the United States. We are competing on a completely different level than anyone else is being made to do, and yet they want to call it free trade.
Well, and my argument is, and I am, let me get this clear. I am certainly no economic, I am not an economic expert on trade and global trade. I like trade, but here's my argument. It's very simple because I'm a simple-minded guy. If they say free trade benefits us all, and in the 1970s we had 50 million head of sheep, and now we have 5 million head of sheep, I see a problem there. I see a problem that's what does that cost? That's
right.
That's an economic cost to producers, to landowners. I mean, so that means thousands upon thousands have gone out of business, which has hollowed out rural America. Those are all inhibited costs to the American people, and especially those producing the food. So there is no free trade. All of that trade has a cost to it, and we should be propping up the American producer, number one. And we're not doing it in any, I can only speak from my perspective in the beef industry or the cattle industry. And from what you and I have talked about in your industry, I mean, if we don't have enough gumption to label our product and be proud that we produce a USA product, born, raised, and harvested in the USA, and we don't have enough pride, even other producers that don't believe in that, that's a problem. I think that's a love of country problem, to be honest with you.
No, and it drives to a bigger problem, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about because what you're talking about there is country of origin labeling. That something can be brought in, and I'm going to explain this in the simplest terms possible. Something can be brought in from another country, a piece of meat. It's brought in. It's moved from one box to another. It changes packaging, and it can be slapped with a sticker, product of the United States. That beef could have been raised in Australia. It could have been raised in South America, in Africa. During COVID, they were bringing beef in from Nambia for the first time ever. Yet we couldn't get our cattle produced in the United States. Yet Congress is not enforcing that rule. They're not allowing for us to make them tell them where it comes from. And to
Well,
me,
I'm
it's
sorry,
common sense.
and their authority up.
Sure,
Congress
they
has
have.
given authority up to bureaucrats, and they're making the rules. And somebody said on the internet they were anti-Trump or whatever, and they're like, Trump has decimated USDA. Hey, we need to decimate USDA.
Right?
We have real power problems in these federal agencies, and then the federal agencies not only make the rules, but then they filter all that power into global corporatism. And then where are we left at? This is a mess.
Yeah. No, but we talk about the corporate side of this all the time, and you look at what these big packers are holding. I mean, in your industry, it's 80% of it's controlled by four corporations. I think in the sheep industry now, 75% of it's controlled by three. Like we're at a loss, and we continue to lose ground, and yet we have congressional offices authorizing money to send out to these other countries to develop their markets to be able to send. We are using American taxpayer dollars to send to other countries to help them develop their markets so they can then turn around and send it back to the United States at the detriment of the American producer. This happens. People are like, oh, that doesn't. No, this happens, and it happens a lot. And then you have big corporations and the WH group, prime example of what happened with Smithfield Foods. When China come in the WH group and they purchased Smithfield Foods, they invested a whole bunch of money, and it hit Utah disproportionately because one of our counties, they produce a lot of pork, and they had a lot of pork producers. Chinese come in, invested a large amount of money. What happens? They close Farmer John's out in California, and they eliminate 1/5 of the pork processing in the United States overnight. They completely wipe out an economy and a county here in the state of Utah, not to mention across the rest of the country. We are giving these global corporations the power to influence and affect the food supply in our country by the day.
Absolutely. And it's a real problem. I remember I think it was 1997 or 98 when the pork went totally vertically integrated. I was in college. I can remember livestock judging out in the Texas Panhandle, and we went to this huge individually owned pig farm to look at hogs. I wasn't a hog guy, but I was judging for them, and they were teaching us about all of these things. And these people probably had, I don't know, it was not all indoor. It was mostly outdoor. They probably had 800 to 1,000 sows. I don't know. And then a year from that day, there was weeds growing up. I can remember that day that the thing broke. The hog market just broke, and they went to 3 cents a pound or something like that. It was just awful, and put all of these people out of business. And then here we go. Smithfield owns it now, and we're at their pleasure. And it's just a sad thing for Americanism. It's a sad thing for American producers who had their livelihoods. They've all worked very hard over the years to create the life that they want. It's not that it's that profitable on a good year. It's that the life that they want, they believe in producing for their family and their community and their country, and then that's all gone. And so to get back to something you said, in 2020, when we all got that letter from the USDA that was warning us about them sending teams out to help facilitate an alternative marketing and or destruction of harvest ready cattle. And that's when I did my initial video. I was not internet aware either until then. And I did that video, and it went viral. because of the reason you just alluded to. You were we had given. I was so angry that day, and my dad had told me about in the 30s and the 50s when they came out and exterminated cattle, euthanized cattle due to drought and disease. So I knew it was possible. And then so we get that on the very.
So why don't you tell people about that letter? What did the letter actually say? Because a lot of people still aren't aware of this.
Oh yeah, they're not aware of it. But the letter just said we are going to facilitate teams of people that will come to your operation and help find alternative markets and or not destruction or disposal, but euthanize. But they didn't use euthanize. They used a good word.
They used a nice word.
Yeah, and
what was the reasoning?
Because they were getting cattle backed up in the plants, in the beef plants all over the United States, because all the workers were getting sick, right? And so then nobody came to work. So harvest ready cattle were backing up. Well, it's not like hogs and chickens. You go out and kill a cow, you got lots of death on your hands, right?
True.
And that just made me so mad, because we got that letter or that email the very same day that the first time in history we imported cattle, grass fat cattle from Namibia, and people are standing in lines needing food like they haven't since the Great Depression. And I was so mad. I was like, this is baloney. This is nonsense. And I just did that video off the cuff, and it apparently scared, or it resonated with people about their food supply, because that concentration of food supply, they actually experienced it during the COVID lie. People couldn't get to work, and then harvest ready cattle, and we were, plowing up all of our vegetable crops. We were killing and euthanizing thousands and thousands of sows, millions and millions of chickens, and then all of a sudden everybody goes to the grocery store one day, and there's no beef on the shelf. And yet we're going to help American producers euthanize their harvest ready cattle or find alternative markets, and we're going to import Namibian beef the same day. That blew my mind, that they could even have the gall to put that email out. And I was like, this can't happen, so I did that video, and I didn't know what viral meant back then. I do now.
You do now. But listen, and this is what people don't understand. And I hope that COVID would have had a silver lining that would have said, okay, we appreciate this more now. And for a minute they did. But what was happening during that time frame is exactly what you alluded to. We are importing beef from across the border. We're bringing in Namibia beef. We're bringing it in from Canada. We're bringing it across the border from Mexico. We had 500,000 cattle backlog here in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Beef is at record prices in the stores. You can't find it even on a good day. American consumers cannot get their hands on beef, and the government is offering to send people out to your place to basically shoot your cattle and dispose of them because of the situation that we're in. All the while, I'll never forget this, and I don't know if you remember it, and I don't know if we've actually talked about this. Trump was in a meeting, and you had some people on his left in cowboy hats and people on his right. And somebody says to him, and I will never forget the look on his face, and I've even mentioned it to people close to him before, that I will never, as long as I live, forget the look on his face when he was on national television and they came to him and said, we have a 500,000 head backlog in this country, but we're still importing them from Canada. And the look on, he looks to his right, and somebody was going to die, because he was one mad hombre.
That was the day that they rolled. So immediately after that, like, Carson, that video went so quickly, like in 10 minutes, people are calling me. And I did it just for kind of an RCAF deal for my friends at RCAF and some of the friends that I'd met over our similarities on the internet in the beef industry. And in 10 minutes, I had people calling, and they're like, this thing's going viral. What are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. But anyway, that evening, at the time it was Dr. Ronnie Jackson called me, and he called me from the White House. And he's like, Shad, we need to talk to you. And so the next day I had a conference call, and they just told me, they said, like, don't ask who's on the line. Well, I'm pretty sure it was Trump, but I can't prove that. But it was the very next day, Trump rolled out the coronavirus food protection program, remember? And he was standing in the middle on live TV, and this food was on a table in front of him, and to his right was the NCBA, and to his left was the Farm Bureau. And he's in this live meeting, and you know how I just love the guy. I mean, whatever he comes to his mind, he says, and that's what I love about people. But he said, and I quote, "What are we doing importing beef from Namibia?" And I knew right then who I had talked to, right? And right then, the NCBA on one side and the Farm Bureau on the other side, their eyes got really big. They finished that program, and then you never heard another word about the whole situation from President Trump. And I knew, I said, well, they've gotten to him. And then I had a guy high up in NCBA tell me that I had tried to destroy the beef industry. And I said, why look around? I mean, 2015, 2019, and now 2020, people are losing their livelihoods like crazy. The beef industry has been destroyed. It can only go up from here. And so, and me and him are kind of friends now. But anyway,
but that's what happens. Those at the top, here's what people don't understand about how this deal works. You get people at the top of these farm organizations, and guess what? They're the same as the lobbyists. They're the same as everybody else. It's go along to get along. They're not protecting anything. They're protecting themselves, and they're speaking out for those who pay their bills. And that is a problem. They follow the money. They are going to represent whoever is funding their projects. And the beef producers in the United States, the independent producers, don't have the big money to pay these lobbyist groups, to pay these firms in DC, to go to your representatives, to pay them money to be able to do what you want them to do. But guess who does? The big corporations.
Yep, that's right. And that's why we need people like you going to Congress and saying, hey, we've got to end lobbying, because what law can be justice? What law can be proven to be justified if it has been tainted by bribery? And that's what lobbying is bribery. And you get back to these trade organizations that are creating and enforcing policy, and you have people running these organizations, number one, that are being paid by the global cabal, by coming down through the global corporate system. And you had number two, that we're paying them through our checkoff dollars. And so they have these massive amounts, $80 million to $100 million comes through NCBA. Tell me that is not influential. It's influential. And the problem with these guys is still that even though those two issues are huge problems, the problem is they don't have stake in the game. They wouldn't know how to produce an ounce of food for their family or for their community if they tried. And that is proven to be a huge problem. They're just going, everything that they do is influenced by corporate cronyism, is influenced by the dollar, it's all pay to play. We've got to end pay to play to get this country back on track, because, and you know, one of the leaders at NCBA, one of the chief executive officers, one time posted on I don't know, Facebook or Twitter or something, and he posted a picture of his family, and he says, my ancestors once worked on this famous ranch. And I'm like, what? Your ancestors 5, 6, 8 generations ago worked on this famous ranch in Texas, and that's your experience with the American industry? And so it's funny because we roll into today, and I was just, you know, the cattle market broke today, and I was talking to the guy in Chicago that handles my hedges, and he's like, I'm like, Tony, what is going on here? And he's like, Shad, it was time. But he said our biggest problem is we have these right out of college, global corporate influenced kids coming to run these huge companies. And he said, it's turning into a disaster. And I agree with that. It's the lack of experience, lack of stake in the game. I like to say steak because I'm a beef producer. That's causing a lot of this.
No, that's it. There's a big disconnection between what they're learning in a book at a university and what actually happens out on the ground. You see it all over the place. You see it time and time again. And it's this quest for cheap food and this vertical integration that's causing a lot of the problems that we're running into. And I tell people this all the time. Some of the people are like, oh, agriculture is inhumane. It's this, it's that. And I said, some portions of it can be, and some of it I don't agree with. I'll give it that. But the fact that the smaller population is being forced to feed a bigger population that continues to grow while the ones feeding it is shrinking, things have to be done. And we're coming into practices that may not be, and not in our industry in particular, but in other industries, this hunt for cheap food because people want it. People want cheap food. And what does that lead to? It leads to vertical integration. The hog industry is probably the best example of it so far. I mean, turkeys were a big part of it there for a long time, but the hog industry is probably the greatest example of vertical integration that there is. These pigs are raised in barns now. They are on a tight schedule, and it is the most profit. That's what the big corporations are looking for. The most profit they can pump out. And so people want to blame it on that. But as this vertical integration grows, so also does consolidation. And that's where we're headed as well. I mean, we're headed in the same direction. And if it isn't this, then it's fake meat. And if they can't do that, they'll force you to do something else.
Well, and that, I think that is one thing that COVID, there was only one thing that COVID did good. And that was it woke people up to how volatile their food system is in America, because it is so concentrated. And when it's not spread out, then you have not only a disruption in your food supply chain, but also the supply chain itself. It's our ability to get it to the people. And so that's one thing that we need to really be cognizant of and fight for, is the decentralization. I'm all about breaking them up. I'm like, let's get some competition going. But also we have come to a time, and it's something that we need to also all be talking about, because it's all an interwoven web of diabolical vileness. And that is how the climate change alarmists and the people that use climate change as their God, how they have interwoven themselves into this global governance system and this global corporate system, which is top-down controlled. And that is becoming a huge problem, because here we have, let's just take, for example, this week, the Olympics is on hot and heavy. And now we have all of these Olympic athletes complaining about the food in the Olympic Village that they're making for them. There's no protein. They don't want to kill animals, right? They have this ideology that is it's anti-animal. It's anti-animal ideology. But these superior athletes, they need this protein. Well, they're pushing us towards alternative protein measures, plant-based, insect-based, fake-based, all of this stuff, when the real deal, the health of a nation and the health of a country, is based off of real protein. The propaganda of climate change, and that's what it is propaganda, right? I mean,
sure. But I mean, when you look at the climate change thing, because that's becoming a huge thing, people are like, well, why is everybody protesting in the UK? Why are they protesting in the Netherlands? Why are they in Brussels? Why are they blocking the streets? It's because of the climate initiatives. And you look at controls, because people are like, well, how can they control you? There is a million ways in this country in which the government can control agriculture. And for me, the big one that they're trying to ram down everybody's throat is what's on your mind, top of the mind, is the RFID. Mandatory RFID, the ability to track these cattle from day one, so that if you do not meet, ask Europe how that worked out. Ask the United Kingdom how RFID works out for them, because it is the ability to prevent you from moving your cattle to market if you don't meet their sustainable climate needs. That is exactly, this is all about control, because if they say it's about disease traceability, but that's an absolute lie, because currently in disease traceability, the United States is as good as it gets. From everything I've heard and from talks that we've been in, that they can track a diseased animal with what we have right now back to where it originated within an hour, hour and a half.
Yep.
What do you want more than that? No, that is not what they want. What they're saying is not really what they mean. They want the ability to say, hey, you didn't meet your carbon goals for this month. You can only sell X amount of cattle. And this is not, people are saying, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. This is no, they have flat out said this, that
Yeah.
that's what they want, that
Well,
the higher ups want it.
yep, that's right. And it's even on the USDA page. I mean, what let's take a step back from what you're talking about. You are 200% right. Every single thing you have. But what is that? Those are all property rights issues. You see, in America, freedom and liberty doesn't exist without private property. And cattle are private property. Anything you use to make your living and put food on the table, it might be your car. That is private property. And they do not believe, see, in a free country, private property is king. But in communist countries, there is no private property. So they have total control. And that's what this is. You said it. It's a control mechanism. But if they gain power and control over private property, your cattle, your sheep herd, your ability to buy guns to go hunting and put food on your table, your car, your ability to buy books and learn, that's all private property. Then they can control you. See, if they can control what you own, they can control every aspect of their life. And the American people have slowly let that happen. And they say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. And I say, well, in 2023, Klaus Schwab said, you will own nothing. And he also, like and you will love it. And he also said, you will not eat meat, only occasional for a special treat for the good of our health in the nation. That's what Klaus Schwab said. He's a global elite. And so we can't dismiss all of these things that are happening as conspiracy theories, because they are coming together the way we have been told they would come together. I mean, it's not a secret anymore. They're bragging about it. And so, yeah, through the RFID system, they come and they will, we learned it from Jim Mundorf, measure, monitor, report, and verify. They will measure what you have. So under the RFID system, they will measure the amount of cattle you own in the name of climate change. Let's go back. It's in the name of climate change, your carbon footprint.
Don't forget that.
Right. And they will measure what you have. They will monitor all of your production methods and all of your production results. And then the most dangerous part of that is they will verify. And what verification comes with is a third-party verifier that you pay for. And that verifier has rules that he can go by and change on a whim. It's very subjective. And so he has power over your operation, your private operation. So we have measure, monitor, report, and verify. And if they decide that your carbon footprint on your private property, that's what natural asset companies was going to do.
Bingo. I was just going to talk about that. Natural asset resources and ESG.
Yep.
These are not secrets. This is not conspiracy theory. They tried to put natural asset resource companies on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yep.
To Marlo Oaks' credit, the state treasurer here in Utah headed up a national effort to shut that down. And in my opinion, single-handedly stopped it. I mean, he had a lot of help in the end, but he blew the whistle on it and he ran it to the top. And he stopped these climate change folks, global elites, whatever you want to call them, from putting on the New York Stock Exchange, which was coming up the next day, the ability to buy up carbon credits to be able to manage your private property how they see fit.
That's exactly right. And
this is not conspiracy theory anymore.
With their access to the management of your private property, all what that did was it transferred wealth. It transferred the wealth. Even though you're paying the taxes on the land that you may or may not own, you pay the taxes on it. They get the management captured because of the natural asset companies, and then all of that wealth is dispersed to other countries, to other corporations. And so what do we talk about when we talk about having this wealth, this transfer of wealth? They get richer and richer and richer, and they get more power, more power, more power. They influence more people, more legislators, more bureaucrats, and it's just an absolute
It's a snowball. But
Yes.
at that point, and this is a question I want everybody who listens to this to think about. At that point, when things like ESG and natural asset resource companies, when those things come to fruition, do you still have freedom? Because you don't. I'm sorry. You
The
don't
answer,
have freedom at that point.
no.
The answer is no. You don't have freedom. You cannot come and go as you please. Your private property is no longer yours. And this country was founded on life, liberty, and property.
That's
And
right.
that because your property is your freedom, and freedom lies in being able to come and go as you please, to manage what you have on your place the way that you see fit to it. And government and these global elites refuse to leave us at that. But then you come west of the Mississippi, when much of our ranching and agriculture relies on public lands, man, they have control. And it is, again, this is the biggest, in my opinion, and this is just me talking, in my opinion, this is the biggest attack RFID, ESG, natural asset resource companies, those things are the biggest threat to our country and to our freedom that currently exists.
No joke. That is exactly right. And Glenn Beck, when I was on his show, I think it was Glenn Beck. I've been on a lot of them, crazy. But he said, "What is the number one concern in production agriculture?" And I said, "The attack on private property," because that's what it is. You see, these global elites, they hate freedom. They only think they should be free, and they hate America because it's prosperous under a system of capitalism and constitutionalism, right? We've been a very prosperous and favored country because of all of these things that we do because of liberty, right? Because of the shed blood of many, many millions of Americans that we should honor every day, right? They've kept us free and healthy and full of liberty. But the globalists and the climate change alarmists and the climate change crazies is what I call them. They hate freedom. They're communists, and so their influence and infiltration into our system. And it's not. I say agriculture is where it started, and it is, but into every facet of American society, of global society, they want communism, and we see that in everything. We see that play to I can't think of what it's called right now, but communal, right? Everybody's equal. Well, that's not the way our systems.
It's equity, don't you know? It's equity.
Well,
It's equity.
Here we go back to what you were just talking about. The mother of sustainability was Gro Brundtland. She's the one that created DEI and ESG. And she's the mother of sustainable development, and she was a commie, right? She was a commie. And let me tell you something: when people talk about socialism or democratic socialism is communism. Socialism is voluntary communism. That's what that is. And
Sure.
at the end of the day, the communist tyrants have no loyalty. One communist is going to kill the last communist. There's only going to be one left over, right? And so all of these people that are playing into this game and saying, we want communism, it's a great way. Those people are going to starve to death, and it's going to be a hell of a hard death, because it's going to be ugly. Because that's not,
Sure.
Communism isn't about the people. Communism is about the person, the one who has ultimate control, right? So I get really aggravated.
No, I get it, because it's frustrating because we see it. But you want to talk about, I mean, when we start to talk about communism and socialism and what's happened, anybody who's a student of history understands. Look at Mao's Cultural Revolution. Look at what Stalin did. What is the first thing they do when they want to take over? There's two things that every dictator has done. First thing is they remove the guns. The second thing is they go after agriculture, because if you control the food, you control the people. And honestly, that's what RFID is. That is what ESG is. That is what natural asset resource corporations are for. What they are for is to take over agriculture and make it the way that government wants. They're putting the power in the hands of a few to be able to control those. As people, as Americans, as Americans, it is not only our job, it is your duty to push back on things like this. And the fact that there is a huge segment of the population who is unwilling to recognize that this is actually happening and that this is a problem is frankly quite terrifying.
Well, it is. And here's what I say now at the end of all my talks. You have a choice to make. You either choose freedom or you choose tyranny. Those are the only two choices you have. And if you like the way you live now in America, you're free. But if you don't stand up for that, you're going to live under tyranny. And we're there. Don't kid yourself. We're on a very dangerous point in America in terms of control, food and consumption and production control. We're in a very dangerous position here because we have so many people apathetic to their freedom, and they don't get. That's what my goal is in the war on beef, is to relay. I always say at the end of my talks, where there is beef, there is freedom. And so as long as we have the ability to produce beef on our land, we have freedom and we can fight. But once they gain control, which is they are pushing that hard. I mean, God bless Brett Kinsey, the president of RCAF, notified me yesterday about on USDA's website, their overarching goal is to have control of the food product from birth to plate.
Yeah.
That's not USDA's job.
No.
That's not their. So
no. But that, again, all about control.
Yeah.
And implementing, and people have their blinders on when it comes to the implementation of these small controls. And it's by varying degrees they are instituting these things. I mean, look at RFID, prime example, omnibus spending. How much, Shad, how much did they allot to the American producers to be able to force mandatory ID? What was it? 15 million was in the omnibus spending.
That's the initial cost, right? Or 25, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was in the bill. People are like, oh, they're never going to do. No, they are already apportioning funding, your taxpayer dollars, to go out and force tag every animal in the United States, every cattle, every sheep, all of them.
Correct.
They want tags in their ears from the time they're born. They want to identify how many are on your place. They want to know about anything that happens. They are going to come into your private property and check up and verify. As you said earlier, this is not something down the road. This is happening right now.
It's now. And I mean, the American people, you see, back to the choice of freedom or tyranny. So, that there are, so there's the left and the right, right? There's conservatives and there's non-conservatives. And I get so aggravated at our conservative friends because they don't want to be bothered. And I get it. They need to work. That's a responsibility built within them that they have to stay home and work. They got to run their ranches. Their businesses in town. I get that. But right now we're at a point where we have to make our voice heard on liberty side. Now you have the left who believes in communal control, and they're all, listen, the left, unless you're very much in the middle, they're all communists. They believe that they don't believe the same as the conservatives. The conservatives are more responsible. The left, I would say the left is lost. They're lost because they don't know where their resources come from. I mean, some of the conservatives are like that, but and I say once you get 3 generations removed from the family, from food production, you get lost. And these people are
that far.
Are lost is because they haven't had to suffer. And I was telling a guy earlier today, I'll never forget. Some of my dad's last words. I said, "What are we going to do?" We were sitting on the front porch of his bunkhouse, and he was dying. And I mean, it was bad and ugly. It was cancer. And I said, "Dad, what are we going to do?" And he said, "Shad, will never change this country until everybody sits in the dark, cold, and hungry." And there's so much truth because suffering changes perspective. And he was one of those guys that put everything he had together. I mean, we were generational ranchers. but they didn't inherit anything. They had to dig in and do what they wanted to do. And so he knew those sufferings. He knew them completely. And, I mean, he remembered the 40s and 50s, and he remembered the 80s, and and
They've
so
been
that
there.
creates knowledge and wisdom. And these people to the left have no knowledge and wisdom of anything real. They just spit out what they've been told. And what
Yeah.
they've been told comes from the global elite.
Yeah. And that's what they want, though. I mean, that's what they want them to believe. And
Oh, yeah.
it's, again, it goes back to the things you ask kids where milk comes from, and they say the grocery store. Where does
Yep.
food come from? The grocery store. And it's that lack of knowledge and that lack of understanding that makes you unrational, that doesn't let you make rational decisions when it comes time. And you have a big segment of the population being run by these politicians who are telling
Yes.
farmers and ranchers how to do their job.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but somebody who's representative for Los Angeles County should not be telling farmers in Iowa or in Nebraska or Utah or Texas, for that matter, what they should be doing. And government was never meant to be that big. And that's why people are like, you're a sheep rancher, you got all this going for you, your family. Why get involved in politics? Because politics has become ingrained in everything.
Yeah.
Everything that started to affect our ranch and your ranch and my friends and their businesses and generational farmers who have been on that land for 7, 8, 10 generations, it's affecting them all, and it's
Oh,
driving them off.
but
And
it's more importantly though, Carson, is it's about your kids, and it's about my kid. It's about the future. I mean, I'm 50 years old, and I've had a super phenomenal life. I feel very blessed. If I was to die today, I'm okay. But my son, who's 9 years old, I believe that our kids deserve to taste freedom. They
sure,
deserve they deserve that.
no,
Just like we.
and they do. There's a quote, and I don't know if it was John Adams, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something to the effect of, if there's going to be a trouble, let it come in my lifetime
Yeah.
so that I can deal with it and not my kids. And I wish I was better remembering it off the top of my head. But that's why I'm here, because I don't want my kids to have to deal with it. Because in agriculture, here's the funny part. In agriculture, it's not there. If you don't do something, it doesn't go away. It goes away. And you are the one, once ag's gone, it's gone. And
Yep.
if we let it go, it's not there for our kids. And there's no way, you and I both know right now, there is no way back into agriculture unless you inherit it or come upon it somehow and get lucky or have a job in town that's going to pay for it. You don't get to play in agriculture anymore.
And Carson, why does it have to be that way?
It
I
shouldn't.
mean, that's one thing that people really slam RCAF about, but that's one of our goals, is to get this system to where we can pull these kids. Number one, the family, the inheritors, or the 5 generations, get that last generation back on the ranch. Number one, where it'll make money, so they have incentive. We can't produce food for the world without a profit. We have to have incentive to be there. And number two, we there's a lot of people, especially now since COVID, that have come to understand the terms of production agriculture and feeding their families, and they want to get involved. And they're every day there's more and more people. They call me, how do we do that? How do message me? And it's, my answer is the same as your answer. But wouldn't it be nice to let a young man and his wife, who have this dream to ranch, wouldn't it be nice if they could see at least a profit? I mean, if you go into borrow money
Right?
now, you can't even show a profit. You can't even show how you would pay for that land. But wouldn't it be cool if? And some people say, well, it was never that way. But I will tell you that it was, and there was a lot of people in the midsection of the United States, and they're all still up there in Nebraska and South Dakota, that paid for these ranches long ago with money that they made.
Sure. Back when, I mean, the sheep industry used to be one of the most profitable industries in the country. I mean, here in Utah, it was huge. I mean, the sheep industry built the state of Utah. Sheep men were building banks because they were making so much money that they had to have their own banks.
Yep.
I mean, Fountain Green, Utah, 15 minutes from here, was called the
Yep.
richest little city in America. There
Yep.
was so much money flowing through there because of agriculture. And this comes back to me as American exceptionalism, and we've lost the pride in being able to be Americans. And
Yes.
to me, that is the problem, and that's the place where we found ourselves right now. Is people don't have pride in being an American anymore, and
Well,
they don't like people who do. But when you look at agriculture, the most pride in America that you'll ever see, you go to rodeos, you go to whatever, it is first and foremost. The country is at the center of it all. But again, these global elites, these higher ups, they want you to hate America. They don't want people independent. They want a dependent population who will do what they want them to do when they want them to do it.
well, and you can look around. I mean, you can go to your nearest Walmart, which has hollowed out the rural America, American society, and you sit on a bench in Walmart and watch the people, and half of them come in sweatpants. There's no pride in themselves because the propaganda from the top has convinced them that there is no equity, that there is equity where you decide to work. There is equity where you work hard. I'll always be a believer because I've experienced it. Hard work brings prosperity. But you could go to these towns and nobody has any self pride. I mean, we're all, including me, we're all overweight. You're not overweight, by the way, but we're all overweight. We wear sweatpants. We don't care. We look like crap everywhere we go. You go back to pictures of the even during the Depression. Man, they may have had one suit, but that suit was zipped up. People looked nice. They had pride in themselves because they had hope, and hope brings an incentive to work and become more and more. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where today they want you to think there's something wrong with that because of equity. It's all about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what it is. Grow Brundtland, the mother of sustainable development.
They want it. They want you to have no hope. And yes. I think, man, I don't think you could describe the entire situation better. They want it to become hopeless. They want people to look to the government. They want them to say, hey, I can't do this myself. I need the government to take care of me. And the independent producers, cattle, sheep ranchers, farmers, I mean, these are the guys who are saying, nah, we got this. They are independent. They are the ones who bring that hope. And I truly believe that that's why they're bringing the hammer down on them so hard. And not only that, because they're such a small segment of the population, they don't really have the ability to defend themselves nor the assets to defend themselves against government predation. And oftentimes they stand on their own. And that's why we have to have people. That's why we have to tell our story and make sure that the general population understands what we're going through to build these movements, to be able to keep this, to be able to make sure that I'm a 6th generation sheep. My family's been doing this for 150 some odd years now. My kids are 7. And I want to make sure that it makes it there, that those who want the opportunity, it really gets me, but you see these stories and you hear these stories of ranchers and farmers across the country walking off their place and things, be the one to lose it, that this has gone through 7, 8, 10 generations in your family, and you're the last one to close the gate on the way out. I mean, that's tough. And
let me tell you something. There's a journalist in Colorado, and her name is Rachel Gable, and her and a guy that owns a sale barn in Sterling, Colorado, Jason Santamasso. They've got a podcast dedicated to mental rural health now. And she was asking me about it, and I can remember the 1980s, and my mom and dad had put quite a bit of land together, not hundreds of thousands of acres, but they'd put quite a bit of land together. And in 1979 or 78, I guess, my dad and mom decided they would buy her ranch, her parents' ranch. And my dad told me, he says, I can remember that day I went in to sign the note, and he looked at the banker, and that loan officer said, he said, Jerry, my dad was named Jerry, and my dad said, I think I'm making a mistake. Because he could feel something in the air about what was coming. And that loan officer said, "Oh, Jerry, you'll do fine and go and be a better man because you're buying this ranch." And their other three ranches were paid for, right? And boom, the 1980s hit, and he lost three to save one. And one of those ranches was his parents' ranch, their homestead. And do you know that was the beginning of the end for my dad? He was never the same man after he lost that, and he fought mental. I didn't realize it because I was living with him and amongst him, but I look back at it now, and I know he was challenged mentally. He had highs and lows, and he was never a danger to himself or others that I thought. But he had a hard role after that, and he told me about remembering during the Depression, one of their neighbors had blew off because of the situation. He had lost his ranch, and so those things are all real, and those things that affect people urban wise, they also affect us. The difference is we don't have access to that kind of health care. And there's all kinds of things. And so when you talk about the ag population being less than 1%, that's a real deal, buddy. Because once you get rid of that 1%, then they have total control, right? And so we got to really be strong. We have to stand for what's right. It's not about right and left. It's about right and wrong. It's about smaller government. We have to get the weaponization out of our governments. And we may have to do these things that we don't want to do. You see in Idaho, they're driving tractors and trying to take their water from them in Idaho. I don't know the whole story, but these people have made a statement. I think that's important. They did that in other countries too. So, it's just the thing I would press to get across to everybody is that all of these issues that we're fighting, both on and off the farm, are interwoven.
Sure.
And they're designed to be this way. And we have to start studying to understand how that interwoven diabolical vileness has come to be and how it's going to affect our life right now. But not only now, but our kids' future, because we're in a dangerous position here.
No, and it's funny you say that about the kids' future, because we've really come full circle. I mean, that it's part of the land, and that we are part of that, and farmers and ranchers are so important to them, and it's generational. It's not just about you. It's about what's next. It's your posterity. It's in your blood. It is what it is. And so I looked up that quote while you were talking, and it says, "If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace. And this single reflection, well applied, is sufficient to awaken every man to duty." And that was Thomas Paine.
That's powerful.
That the knowledge of this must push you to do something. And that's the thing I want everybody to understand when it comes to agriculture. They ask, how can we help? What can we do? Understand. Get to know, listen to the people closest to it, and be able to take it away and stick up for those people who are feeding you 3 times a day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's nice to know other people understand this. They often say, "Well, Shad, what do you need to do?" And I said, "Well, there's a lot of things I would suggest doing. And number one is we return to honoring God. And number two, we return to honoring the Constitution, the very thoughts and actions of our forefathers, which created the greatest country on earth and showed us favor for 250 years. And we have to buy local, and we have to get involved in our local politics, whether it's a school board, a county commissioner, or the church. We have to do that because believe it or not, our churches are infiltrated as well. We have to spend the extra money and time to go, buy our every product, food or non-food, make sure it's USA. I think that's very important. We have to hold our legislators accountable, the people that represent us. They are our voice, and they're not representing us now. We have to yell at them now. We have to choke them and say, "Hey, guys," right? And then we have to go in and we have to support legislation that decreases this monster we call the U.S. government. We have to decrease the size of government, because one of these days, who's going to be here to produce and pay these taxes so these guys can have their big jobs? It isn't going to be me and you. I don't know. They're just going to print more money, I guess, because that's what it's in. It's not government is not incentivized to represent the people. It's incentivized by pay to play now, and that's a problem.
Sure. No, and with that, man, that's the answer. That's what it is. That's where we're at. That's what folks need to do. And man, thanks for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time and giving it to people to understand, because again, if we're going to survive in the future, it's going to take us telling our story and people to hear it. So, well, thanks again, man. Get back to work.
Well, thanks for having me on, Carson.
Anytime, pal. See ya.
All right. Bye.